Today, we're heading to the Gros Morne Fall Fest in Cowhead, Newfoundland and Labrador, and can't pass up the opportunity to sit down with folks who know the songs and stories of this area so well. I'm Aaron Collis, and I play with the band Rum Ragged. For over a decade now, we've been collecting songs and tunes from around Newfoundland and Labrador that have been passed from person to person for generations. Now we're visiting some of the communities where we learn the music and some of the singers and players who help keep it alive. There's so much more to hear.
It's not just the town, it's the whole area. Like when you're coming from Cornerbrook or even St. John's and you get to a certain area where you're out of the trees and you come around a turn and suddenly there's the ocean. It's like no other feeling in the world, because when you grow up near the ocean like I did, you miss it when you're not by it. My name's Stephanie Payne and I'm from right here in Cowhead. I really loved growing up here. I spent a lot of time what we call over on the head. It's a peninsula off of the mainland, because that's where my dad grew up. That's where the community was. And some people would move over here in the winter time, and so that became known as Summerside, and this was called Winterside over here. And then they were resettled, I think, 60s, I believe, and so everybody was moved over here to Cowhead, the town of Cowhead. So I spent a lot of time there, because when I was growing up, there were still old houses that people had left, you know, the parsonage that my dad grew up in. That was still standing, this big two-story house that was still, and I can remember looking out the window when I was in school, and I could see Dad's old house growing up over there on the hill, because it was just kind of out by itself. I used to be like, oh, because I always believe I was born in the wrong time. So I think that's probably why I spent a lot of time over there. Even before I was really interested in traditional music or even the history of this area of Newfoundland, I always felt a connection with the past anyway, so I did spend a lot of time over there. We just had a lot of freedom, as you do in a lot of rural communities, which is why I moved back here with my oldest daughter and my two youngest now. I'm raising them here because there's just so much freedom. They can go out, and I live in down the lane that I grew up in, and they can go out and go on their bikes, and I don't have to worry, you know. They can go down to the beach, and I don't have to worry. So it's the same kind of freedoms that I had growing up, and Cowhead really was a lovely place to grow up, I have to say.
What really are your earliest memories of traditional music in Cowhead?
Well, my family. My dad used to sing to us every night before we went to bed, and of course, Jack Was Every Inch a Sailor was the standard, probably in a lot of households. But also like little ditties that people sang along with tunes. Like Dad always used to sing one, oh, the nanny goat chased the billy goat over the fence and tore her petticoat. Those little ones like that, and Uncle Manuel milks the cow, and all those little ones. So I don't know like my earliest memory, but they were always around when I was growing up, you know, and I guess didn't really put a name of traditional on it till I got older and realized that they were a traditional thing that, you know, that I was interested in later on.
When would you have first gotten into playing and singing yourself?
Oh, I sang a lot growing up, but not necessarily traditional stuff, but traditional music, I really got into it when I started working with the Gros Morne Theatre Festival. And there was a show called Nellie Norris Nights, which now I musically direct myself. But and when my brother Danielle Payne took over as musical director, he kind of tried to incorporate more traditional music and music from this area. And so that's really when I think I got a sense of, oh, this music's wonderful and it's from this area, so this is what I want to do.
Where did you go looking for more when you got the taste for the traditional music?
My Nan Payne was a big source for me. She's gotten a few songs from Nan, and my dad, because he sings a lot of songs his dad sang. Collections too. For us, I mean, we're so fortunate that people just saw, you know, sometimes a need to write them down, and others were just interested in them, and so they came and they collected songs from Newfoundland, and so it's wonderful they did, because now they're in books that I can go to and look at for songs from this area and this region. And I try to learn as many from this area and region as I can.
Going through the books myself, I see a lot of place names from around here, like Parsons Pond or Cowhead, St. Paul's. Yep. And a lot of singers were from around this way. So did you ever have a chance to hear any of those singers, some of the old singers?
No, I was born in the wrong time.
Right.
I did. So I never got to hear any of the older singers, unfortunately. I know people who met them firsthand and know their songs and their family. And
they're still singing
songs. Still sing some of their songs, yeah.
That's how it keeps going, eh?
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly, yeah.
When you get to perform the music from here, the music that you found here in Cowhead that is connected to your community, your family, what does that feel like for you when you get to perform that for an audience?
I always am informed by the audience afterwards and how they felt about that. Really tells me that sometimes I'm always a bit nervous, like, oh, do I talk too much? Or like, because I like to tell the history behind a song, where I learned it, who I learned it from, maybe what some of the context of the song is, and I'm always like, oh, do I talk too much? I wonder. And people are always like so responsive to it in a positive way. Oh, I've learned so much and it's so wonderful. And when I tell them I've learned a song from my Nan Payne here in Cowhead, who's 93 years old, still lives on her own, you know, taught me this one song I always sings that I just called the Cowhead Concert Song because she didn't have a name to it. She heard it when she was young, you know, when she was in her 80s, and she had learned it when she was 7 years old. I'd heard it when she was 7 and remembered it for all those years. I tell people that, they're like, oh, that's amazing. Because a lot of people can't fathom that something can live on for so long in like collective memories or being passed down like that.
Jolly Cowhead folks are we, number three. Some likes coffee, but I likes tea. To me, rum tum tiddle-um, old John Bradlum. Jolly Cowhead folks are we, number four. Some like the rich, but I likes the poor. To me, rum tum tiddle-um, old John Bradlum. Jolly Cowhead folks are we.
They learn so much more about this place, about Newfoundland, about themselves sometimes even, when they hear all those beautiful things about where I learned the music and who I learned it from and why they sang these songs and things like that. And they always leave with a sense of like, I've learned so much from listening to you tell those stories. And I'm always like, good, because I always think I talk too much. So I'm very proud to be able to share music that I've learned from here and from my family and sing that to people. There's another beautiful song Daniel Undercut sang called Duke of Argyll. I've never seen it anywhere else and never heard it anywhere else, and that's from Sally's Cove.
It's farewell now, Miss Gordy, I'm now going to leave you, for to cross the wide ocean, I don't mean to deceive you. I'll cross the wide ocean where the loud cannon rattle.
I wonder what my pop would think. His songs that he sung being sung in front of, you know, thousands and thousands of people every summer.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't know what to think because they only sang it, just like you say, for their own entertainment.
Dressed in men's attire, Alexander, I won't leave you. We will boldly fight on.
I know Butter and Cheese for sure is a song from this area because it was sung, you know, Becky Bennett sang it, Dan Yondicat sang it, and Claire Stevens, they all sang it. And I don't know is that a song?
Yeah, I've definitely heard of it. I didn't know it was from here.
But is it one that you've heard sung?
I heard someone in England do it, but it had a totally different tune to it. It wasn't the same.
See, that's the thing
right?
about when we say Newfoundland traditional music,
Yeah.
I mean, we're saying it came from England and Ireland and France, because there is Newfoundland French song.
Yeah.
So, yeah, traditional Newfoundland music, of course, is not, some of it was written here, but not, some of it, a lot of it came over, but it was preserved here more than sometimes than it was from whence it came.
That's right. Yeah. I know when I went to St. John's and taken like some of the music from out home, and you'd sing it at a session or you'd sing it at a gig, and somebody come up and be like, where'd you find that song to? I thought everybody knew these songs from like the Cape Shore, where I'm from. When you went and sang some songs, was there like particular ones here or tunes that you didn't really acknowledge that everybody, as you just said, had access to those or knew them? But
not me personally, but my dad's, well, I've learned one from my dad called the Roving Newfoundlanders that he learned from his father. And he sung it, you know, at the March Hare, which was a festival in Corner Brook. Nobody had ever heard that song before.
Right.
And it's in the Greenleaf collection, but nobody had ever heard it being sung before. And so that's a song particular to, and I've never seen it anywhere else either, other than that collection. But I do get sometimes the opposite of when I sing a song. So there's a song called Blueberry Ball from Daniels Harbour. Yes. I sings a version of it. I sang that in Daniels Harbour, and I was told it was good, but it wasn't right, because I didn't sing it right. Because, you know, that's how oral traditional music, what happens to it is that someone learns it and might have to change the words because they can't remember it all, or put a bit of a different tune on it. But the community where it originated, or the place where it's sung a lot, they're like, oh, that's not the right version. And then the version that's sung in this community is the right version for that community. And someone else sings it, and they're like, that's not the right version either.
yeah, we've run into that a few times.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Such a rattle and racket I never beheld that night at the Blueberry Ball.
Jim Payne and Fergus O'Byrne are cornerstones of Newfoundland and Labrador folk music. We've shared stages with them before, but since they're also in Cowhead for the Gros Morne Fall Fest, we took the opportunity to learn more about a local musical legend.
So Rufus Ginchard is obviously a very well-known musician here in Newfoundland and Labrador. For anybody who doesn't know Rufus Ginchard,
Well, I mean, it's an uncommon name, right? I mean, every Ginchard in Newfoundland is related to Rufus. And really, like, his grandfather, he was from St. Malo, the St. Malo region of France. That's where the family comes from. Got on a fishing boat out of St. Malo, and they were out here in the Gulf of St. Lawrence fishing. And then when they were up off Daniels Harbour, his grandfather jumped overboard and swam ashore and hid in the woods until the ship was gone. So then, and he basically homesteaded then in Daniels Harbour, and the ship went back without him. That's how the Ginchards ended up in Newfoundland. Rufus was born in 1899. When he was 11 years old, he decided he wanted to learn how to play the fiddle, because he had spent, you know, all his childhood watching some of the players, people from whom he's named the tunes, you know, Esau Payne, Uncle John Peter Payne, you know, and so on and so forth. There was an old fiddle hung up on the wall in his house, so that he got his father to fix it up for him, and he, you know, they didn't have strings, obviously, there no music stores or anything, so they had, you know, some lobster line made one of the strings, and fishing line, and some, it was like some old sort of wax thread that his mother used to use for sewing things. And eventually he came up with 4 strings out of that. And so he started playing, and of course he didn't want anybody to know that he played, so he held his fiddle quite differently from anyone else, tucked it in under his shirt, held the bow only halfway up, because he would always sit on the kitchen table with his feet on the chair looking out the window to make sure nobody would catch him learning to play. And of course if he held his bow all the way down, the bow would strike the window. So that's how he developed the technique that he used, and of course then he became the fiddler of choice, really. And that was you know the way he played all his life. He was a very sort of functionary sort of player. I mean, he played dance music. He composed a handful of tunes, but by and large he really stuck to tunes that he had learned from a lot of the older fiddlers in the region here, you know, the communities close by, kind of thing.
what was your first kind of experiences here? We'll start with Jim. Your first time coming up to the coast.
Really, it was because of Rufus. Because by that time, you know, I was doing a lot of playing with Rufus. Myself and Rufus and Kelly were playing a lot together. The first really major folk festival in the province had taken place in Gros Morne National Park in 77, I think that was. And one of the things that did is that it brought a lot of the sort of younger musicians who were just kind of, you know, part of the revival of interest in traditional music, Newfoundland traditional music, together with a lot of the older people who had been carrying on that tradition practically all their lives from a variety of sort of remote communities from all over the province. Outside of knowing, you know, Rufus and a couple of others I was familiar with, I met, you know, a bunch of other singers from down this way, and then playing with Rufus and talking to him about his experiences on the coast, you kind of got a better sense of who was who and kind of songs they sang and all this kind of stuff, you know. And of course, this coast, like the songs on this coast were very much, you know, part of the kind of the English ballad tradition, which was really quite similar to where I grew up in Notre Dame Bay. I mean, that was very much a West Country English coast. And of course my last name was Payne, so I fit right in on this coast. I mean, everybody thought I was from here.
There's a few. And Fergus, your experiences here first when you first.
Well, my first experience was with the band Ryan's Fancy, just doing shows, but we weren't, you know, I wasn't aware of the song tradition at the time. But my first introduction then to the music was when Ryan's Fancy, we did a show with Rufus. And at the time when we were doing the Ryan's Fancy shows, we were going out on the field in, you know, people's places where they lived and where they played and stuff like that. So we came down the coast and featured Rufus in a show and had a grand time, you know, a night in a club, and he played and we sang and it was just really through Jim that I was made more aware of the songs from this area.
But there must have been some pile of music here if there's so much already still existing, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to drive up the coast and not hum a tune in my head when I pass, you know, Parsons Pan Jig or River of Pans or passing by the SS Ethy. It's hard not to just sing the song in my head.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? The whole coast.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Yeah. Like we've been in the schools here, we've done a kind of a geography class playing a tune that's named for all these communities on the up and down the coast, right? In some ways, the more remote the place is that we go to, because we always try to go to a lot of remote places, You find that people are just closer to the music because the songs themselves talk about, their lives in the community, people's lives in the community. So when you're in a smaller community, you experience that, and you get even if you don't experience it personally yourself, you get the kind of atmosphere that is derived from the fact that your parents have been through it or your grandparents have been through it, right? So it establishes a connection with younger generations, almost sort of partly vicariously from what their own living ancestors have been through, and they get the stories firsthand. And I think that's really the most important part, that they're getting the stories firsthand from people who've had that experience.
And it might not be always, immediate with school. We've been visiting schools for years, and you always come across, there'll be one or two that are really interested, but years later, you're going to come across young people who are grown up, maybe moved away to the mainland or so, and they'll harken back to the time that you were in the school, and they'll suddenly realise, oh gee, I at the time it didn't seem so important, but now the music is so important to me because of the fact that you guys were in and talking about the songs, and they're exploring. Now, obviously, they're not all playing, but we'll always get some who go on to play music and explore the music that they left behind, so to speak, when they were kids.
I would love for people to ask their family, ask their aunts and uncles, their grandparents, do they know any songs, even if it's just little snippets of it, even if they're just little rhymes or poems that come from a Newfoundland song. Like, find them and write them down, because eventually I'll have to pass the torch on to someone else, and maybe my children, but other people too, and just find it to bring some joy and connection to your family.